Okay, I'd like to call the Ellis County Commission meeting to order, please. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Bobby, if I could have you call roll, please.
Commissioner Nathan Liker.
Here.
Chair Neil Younger.
Here.
Commissioner Michael Burgess.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Order of business stays the same. Everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes, we got. Minutes look good.
Okay. Also, the consent agenda. Everybody have a chance to look at that?
Yeah.
Anything there?
Full questions. I'll move to approve consent agenda items A through G. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay. Out of the order of business, does anybody have any issues from the audience? And again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming.
Nope.
Okay. Monthly financial report. Everybody
It's fine.
good?
No questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Look good.
Okay. Okay, the Ellis County 2022 budget year audit report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jamie Benishek, and I'm a senior audit manager with Adams Brown, and I have Alexis Crispin with me, and we're here to deliver the audit report for you today. You have the bound audit report in front of you, and then a loose leaf letter. We'll start with the bound audit report on page 1. This is our independent auditor's report. You'll see paragraph 2, adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. We do not issue an opinion on U.S. GAAP because you do not follow GAAP on your financial statements. You follow the regulatory basis of accounting. So on that third paragraph there, you'll see unmodified opinion on the regulatory basis of accounting. And unmodified opinion is the best type of opinion we can issue. Essentially means you have a clean audit and that your financial statements are materially presented. Any questions on that? Page 4. This is your summary statement of receipts, expenditures, and unencumbered cash. It is essentially a snapshot of what 2022 looked like for you. On the left-hand side, you start with your beginning unencumbered cash balance. You had some canceled encumbrances, add in your receipts, subtract your expenditures, and then you come up with your ending unencumbered cash balance in bold. So at the bottom of the page, you'll see you started the year with $19,589,000 and ended with $21,906,000 in unencumbered cash. The majority of that increase was the KDOT cost share payment that you received in 2022 in your Special Highway Improvement Fund. These numbers also are what Darren uses to start your 2024 budget, so the numbers should look pretty familiar to you as you've gone through your budget process here over the last couple of months. Starting on page 6, these are the notes to the financial statements. They supplement the actual financials that we just went over. They are required disclosures that KMAG requires us to put in with your audit report. If you have a chance to read through all of them and you have questions at a later time, Bobby and Darren both know how to get a hold of me. Be happy to answer any questions you have. There is one footnote on page 11, note 9. Kansas statutes, there are specific Kansas statutes that the county is required to follow that we take a look at and make sure that you are in compliance with them. One of them that you were in violation of this year was a solid waste fund. Expenditures exceeded the budgeted limits. You all are aware of that. I know Darren's gone over that with you, and you guys have a plan in place to make sure that your landfill fees are adequate, and also that you're watching that fund to make sure that you have enough fees in there to cover expenditures and that you're not over budgeted limits. And then on the next page, expenditures exceeded available money in the following funds, so that means the fund actually went negative. Most of, or all of these are just because of the way the fund works. The last 4 are grant funds, so that means you have to spend the money first and then you get reimbursed for it, so that makes the fund negative, but then you get reimbursed for it later. And then the top 4 are just due to refunds that were issued in November or December, and then those are reconciled in the January distribution. And so again, those are just timing. Both of these violations are required for us to note in the audit report, but there won't be any slap on the hand or no letter from the state or anything like that. They're just required for us to put in this audit report. Page 16. This is a recap of all of the debt that was outstanding as of at the end of 2022. So you started 2022 with $8,104,000 of outstanding debt and ended with $7,374,000. It looks like 2030 is the date that all of this debt should be paid off by. Then the rest of the financial statement audit is each fund. So if you have any specific questions on individual funds, we can look at those. But other than that, the financial statement audit that is the gist of the financial statement audit. So because the county spent over $750,000 of federal money, there's a second audit that we have to go through called a single audit, where Alex took a deep dive look at the federal expenditures, and so she's going to go over that part with you.
Okay, so I'm going to have you guys start on page 55. This is the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting. So this is where we note if there were any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses over your financial statements. We did have one item noted that you'll see in the bottom paragraph of that page, and that is item 2022-001, and we will go over it a little bit further in detail once we get further into the report. But other than that, I'm going to have you skip to page 57. So this is the independent auditor's report on compliance for each major program. You guys had an unmodified opinion, so we didn't have any issues that needed to be noted in this section. Page 60 is where you can see all of your federal expenditures for the year. You guys had $2.7 million. The bulk of that was for the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is the major program that we tested. Page 61 are just some general notes that have to go along with the CFA. There weren't any unusual items that would be noted here. It's just pretty standard stuff. Page 62 is basically a summary of the single audit. So for this first portion, it's covering the financial statements. You'll see that you guys have an unmodified opinion on your regulatory basis audit, which Jamie mentioned earlier. We do have that material weakness that I had mentioned over financial reporting, and then once you go down to federal awards, there were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and there was an unmodified opinion. You can also see that that coronavirus program was your major program. And then last thing to note on this page, you guys don't qualify as a low-risk auditee purely because you don't do your audit on GAAP basis. So normal stuff to see. And then 63 is where we go into the details of that financial statement finding, and I'm going to have Jamie kind of discuss that with you.
Okay, so on page 63, there is a material weakness over accounts payable. This actually was a couple of things combined that we found during the audit. So accrued payroll is calculated by your payroll department, and then the clerk's office makes that adjustment based on that calculation. And after that journal entry was made, the account balance didn't quite match back to what was calculated. And so our recommendation is to take it one step further, and after the adjustment is made, just make sure that it actually matches back up to what was provided for the calculation. And then the second part of this finding was there's an open purchase order report that is printed. It encompasses everything that you all have approved but hasn't yet been paid yet. There were a couple of items that kind of got stuck is what I like to call it. It got stuck in the general ledger that just never got cleared out of there. And so, again, the recommendation is to make sure those account balances are matching back to the supporting documentation. And so we have discussed all of the above with the appropriate personnel and have a plan in place to make sure that gets corrected for 2023. Are there any questions over anything we've gone over so far?
Just from an audit standpoint on our debts and bonds, there's no audit issue with essentially paying them off early as we budget for different years.
There's no audit issue with paying it off early, no. I would say if there is a benefit to doing it, sometimes with that debt, you don't save interest on GO bonds by paying it off early. You still have to pay the interest. So that's what I would be more of on a financial standpoint. Is it worth it to pay it off early, or can that budget room be used for something else and just make the normal payments?
Okay.
There is one, the loose leaf letter. It's pretty short. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements at the bottom of that first page that refers to the journal entry we made for the accounts payable issue we talked about. But other than that, there were no other recommendations that we had. So other than the accrued payroll and accounts payable, all of your other procedures and controls seem to be working in place as appropriate. Any other questions at this time?
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you.
There is a management representation letter. If there are no other questions, that needs to be signed.
Do we need a motion then?
So at this time, if you are ready to approve the audit, you can go ahead and make a motion to approve the audit, and then Bobby will get that letter signed for us, and we'll take it back upstairs with us.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the 2022 Ellis County as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Younger, if I may, I just
Okay.
wanted to say thanks to Jamie and Alexis. They started late May, I believe, this year, and they really kept us grounded this year. They did a good job. They asked a lot of questions. I know all departments probably saw them more this year than years in the past, but I guess that's a confirmation that they necessarily earn their money, but they're doing a good thorough work through on our books. So I appreciate their work, and I apologize sometimes for being out of the office and not being able to respond to you right away. I'm sure that kind of happened throughout the process, but thank you for your work this year.
Yeah, definitely want to reach out and make sure you guys know how much we appreciate you, all of the departments, the fee offices, everyone. We start in early May, like you said, actually April probably, and so it's a process to get all the information, but we do get it, and our questions are answered. And over the summer, you're always on vacations. We're on vacations, so don't apologize for being out of the office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you.
again. Okay, Jennifer with the compensation study.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jennifer Taylor, Ellis County HR. And included in your agenda is a classification and compensation study that was provided by the Arnold Group. If you've had a chance to look over it, this proposal will provide us with a large amount of beneficial data that will help to ensure that our employees are classified appropriately within their positions, and that they are at a fair and comparable market value based on their position. Fair and comparable wages help to both retain and recruit employees to the county, and having those external and internal equity also mitigates risk of discrimination lawsuits. Do you guys have any questions over the proposal that was presented?
So this proposal will compare our county jobs to other government institution jobs and not private sector, is that correct?
Yes. So the scope of the work that is included, it includes completing a point factor analysis that determines external and internal wage equity, and they compare apples to apples, basically. They look, they've been doing a ton of work with counties across Kansas, and they come very highly recommended by those counties. But yes, they look at the comparables. I'm assuming they probably look at other so non-government, just to kind of see, but they provide us with data that does compare to where we're at. And then also with that point factor analysis, they do provide review and recommendations for our pay grades and our pay scales to make sure we have all of our jobs classified in the correct pay grade, and that our pay scale is kind of where it should be. But they'll also give reviews and recommendations on our written pay and compensation policy as well.
Okay.
And I do think that having this outside group, the Arnold Group, it does provide an objective third-party partnership approach to reviewing our compensation. And then once they're done with that, it will provide our HR department with a very solid foundation to kind of build upon. That way, in the future years, we can kind of do that compensation and market review analysis in-house, do it ourselves, and build upon what they've provided with us.
Will they be comparing, I mean, just, if you look at our situation out here in western Kansas, will they be comparing our county to, say, likewise counties, or could we be compared to a Johnson County up in eastern Kansas where there's more money, there's more income, there's more, there's a lot more going on?
And I've not worked with this group directly, but what I've seen is they may break it out, but what I've heard is they will provide us with a mid, a mid, a max, and then they might be able to go ahead and say, hey, don't forget, these are the people that were considered within the study, and so I would assume they'd be able to explain to us, don't forget, this kind of looks at everybody to where they might be able to point that out. I'm not sure, I haven't seen their exact results of what that comes with, but in their proposal, they are very adamant about, one, we provide you with the documents, a completed proposal and findings, but they'll go over it in depth and talk about each of the findings as well as what they've said, so.
If I'm looking at this right, there's kind of two options. We're going with the lesser option. Am I looking at
Yes.
that right? There's 23,000. There's an option for 31,000. What's different in what we?
So option number 2, it provides us a way to split the payments up over 3 years. Option number 1 is we pay for a full study, and that includes the first year of any support that we may need. So if we have a new job during the year, a new job description, we can go ahead and get information on that as well. But that is It's actually split up in the first year, 25% at the project kickoff, 25% due at project midpoint, and then 50% of that option due at the finalized point. But option 3 just gives you the opportunity to pay over a longer period of time, but you also get 3 years of support. Since we haven't done anything with this program, we don't know how many years of support we'll need, but when reviewing the proposal, you can see on there at the end of the first option, you have an opportunity to purchase additional years of support if needed, and it still makes more sense that way, as long as we have the funding available to pay that full amount in that first year.
I'm going to tee this up, Darren, a little bit here. I like the idea of doing a cost-benefit analysis of our departments, so I think it's worth it, but the county's done studies before. What good is a study? I have a feeling when they come back, they're going to say you should be paying more or giving better benefits. Typically you do these studies and you don't find out that you're doing everything perfectly. So we get the report back with our shortcomings. What good does that do us if we can't fund it as a county? So
So a couple things. go back to your question between option 1 and 2 first. As Jennifer explained it, it's the cost share over several years. But when we looked at the financial commitment every year after option 1 for year 1, if we decided to stay with them after that, it was only $20, I don't have the proposal in front of me, $2,800. So it's really not going to cost us any more. So that's why we said, we thought if we just did the option 1 up front with the lesser amount, and we did find out that it was very beneficial, the commission liked it, it showed us some good information, we could still basically renew it for the future years and budget for it and it not cost us any more. So that was another reason there, to stay with option 1. The next piece that you'd ask is regards to what would be the plan after we find out what we don't know. That's a hard answer to give, but once we get the results, and I believe it was about a 4 to 5 months, so we'll probably start seeing results come November, December, which will be about the same time that we'll be able to start making recommendations from the wage and benefit, from HR to the commission as to what maybe would be needed next year for salary adjustments. As you know, the current budget that you have set aside has $600,000 for some type of adjustment. As we talk about the final budget here in a little bit, and I spoke to you each a little bit last night about this, is to add an extra amount to that for next year's budget to be able to start making significant changes, essentially on something of what we don't know yet. $250,000 is a lot of money to each of us, but when you spread that out over 200 employees, that doesn't go very far. So depending on what those findings are and the budget discussion that we'll have here in a few minutes, we'll have additional funding dedicated, set aside for this for at least the next couple of years to be able to make adjustments as needed, and hopefully make those adjustments sooner. As Commissioner Burgess alluded to, we did do a pay study back in 2014. It did take us until 2021 to get completed, and probably by the time it got completed, it was outdated already. So it's, with the market the way it's been very employee friendly. Employees are getting, throughout the market, are getting pretty good significant pay increases. So it's hard to say where we're at. The county's been, the county commission's done a great job the last couple of years trying to stay up with those averages. But until we do the study, I can't really give you a number, but at least we'll have money set aside on top of what we already have to be able to make some changes right away up front, a couple months after the study's done.
Yeah, I too will support it. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of money, but let's find out where we're at from an outside agency. In my profession, there's also stuff like this goes on just to see where we're at. Try to retain our people instead of being a training center. We train them, they leave. I want to see where we're at comparing to other, like Commissioner Liker said, I want to see where we're at with other counties and be fair to our employees because we need to keep them. The job world is open. Anybody can go anywhere at any time. So we spend a lot of money on each employee to keep them and to retain them. So I am definitely in support of this.
I do have one more question to add to it. Okay, we've done a study in 2014, which you alluded to is probably outdated by the time it was completed. We're looking at a study to be done now. Is it, it's an ongoing problem to try and keep up with. Are we looking at doing is that what the support is, the additional cost? We would reprobe this on an annual basis?
So the additional support is support that they're providing. I do have a tentative plan. I don't have specific on if it's going to be a 2-year rotation, but using the base information that we have and any findings and adjustments that we make, I am proposing that our HR department continually review, whether it's every year, every 2 years, every 3, however it may be. Usually 2 years is probably a good starting point to make sure every single position, every single job class that we have here within Ellis County is reviewed both locally and then across the state of Kansas as well, to make sure we are maintaining those competitive wages. And we do that currently for any positions that get reported to us to say, hey, or maybe we're falling behind here, we have a ton of turnover in this area, or anything that we may observe throughout the year. We do those market reviews for both local and then statewide as well, because we want to stay on top of that. But after we have the space data, I do foresee putting out kind of a regularly scheduled review to make sure everybody is reviewed regularly without having to do a large wage study.
Okay, that's what I was getting at, was to, if we do this now, it gives us a baseline to continually go back to. So, thank you.
Thanks.
In this study, if we approve it today, this is coming out, the funding's coming out of this year's budget, and then, but they expect to get started now and then be done before the end of 20 weeks, so that's right at the end of the year, or January.
They had an estimated, and it was about 5 months, somewhere in there. So as soon as we can get them the information, they do a lot of work off of our job descriptions, which I do feel like we have fairly strong job descriptions, and any updates that we might have, but they'll go based off of that, and then the information that our HR department will provide to them. Any updates to the timeline, I guess we can kind of pass those along, but that was their anticipated based off of our number of job descriptions, number of employees.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be good. I don't think you need to come every month, but maybe every other month through this process. Just give us a quick update where they're at, or if they expect to be completed by the end of the year, so that way we can kind of prepare ourselves as commission.
Of course.
We're to look at the results and how that might impact our funding. So, appreciate it.
Yep.
And this was all, went over a meeting with the head departments?
Yeah, we met with the Wage and Benefit Committee and the executive team, and their main question that I think Commissioner Burgess asked was their first question too, is if we do a study, what are we going to do about it? And it's not that I can't give you an answer, is that I just really can't give you an answer until we do the study. We don't know what type of commitment we'll have to do.
I think that's on us to be prepared to have, like you said, I think we'll get to that part, and I'll probably have some follow-up questions to it, but I think we got to be prepared with funding. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to, ahead of time, so that way they can have the confidence that we can do something about the study if it comes out. Maybe it all comes out and we're doing just great and we don't have to do any additional funding, but I kind of doubt that's the way it'll come out, so. Okay.
Another big difference between now and 2014 is, back in 2014, there was one person in the HR department, mainly did payroll and everything at that point. Now we have Janet and Jennifer, and then Chris, the assistant, as well, so they'll be able to have more support moving forward, working together to build off of this into the future years, and be able to try to keep us up to date and provide more information. So when we make their annual adjustments, we're doing that for a certain reason other than just what the coal is and inflation is doing around the state.
Okay.
Any idea how many employees we have lost since 14? Probably in that part not, but when the COVID and stuff hit?
And I haven't looked at the information from before I was here, but we've had some over the last year that they did say they were seeking different positions for different wages, for higher wages, better wages. But fortunately, at least from what we've been told, whether that be talking to the employees or during an exit interview, we've been fortunate that a lot of them weren't pay related. So I am fairly confident in the findings. I don't think it's not. I'd be shocked if it was every position. I do feel like we pay very competitively for a large handful of our positions. There are some, of course, that I anticipate coming back that will need adjustments. But at least in the last year, what we've been told is not a lot of people have left
Good.
due to the wages, but there will always be some.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll move to approve PO 7736 to complete the compensation study with the Arnold Group.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, 2024 final draft, Darren?
Good morning, Commissioners. Darren Myers, County Administrator. Before you today is the last, I guess, chance to review the 100 or so pages of budget documents. Before next week, the process next week would be to include any final changes or discussion that you would like to have done to the budget today. Next week will be, as part of the agenda for the commission to motion to approve to allow the clerk to publish the budget, which publishes the budget of where it's at, which then leads to the September 12th, I believe, is the day that we have set for the public hearing. So 2 more pieces to the step to the budget process after today. As the commission is aware, after our July 18th meeting, the commission did meet with all the department heads, and I'll have to commend the commission, I guess, to begin with. That was the longest budget session I've ever sat through. We started at 10 that morning, we got done about 7 that evening. But all jokes aside, it was a very good meeting. I've heard good reviews back from staff that they appreciated the time and the engagement that you had with them and the questions that you asked. It let them know, I think, that you are paying attention and concerned about what they're doing. So, but with that, I did get all the changes that we had discussed that day that the commission would like to see, and it was in the budget that you have in your agenda this morning. I didn't list every single change within the budget, but there's about a dozen bullet points there that I think are very notable that are being done this year as to compared to years past. As the commission knows, we increased public works in several areas. One is to create a road maintenance program for the asphalt roads. So that way, essentially every 6 to 7 years, every mile of asphalt road in the county should either have a seal coat or an overlay to them. The bridge replacement program, Fund 78, was reworked, and hopefully between, we switched that from a 5 to a 10-year program, so we have a little bit more foresight of what's coming out there with some of the larger bridges, and also look at, essentially the plan before was a 5-year plan with 1 bridge a year. Now we're at 10 years with 2 bridges. So instead of looking at the next 5 bridges, we're looking at the next 20. So Brendan got that put together to give us a better long-range plan of what needs to be done and what kind of funding we need to look at there. One of the concerns that the commission has been aware of is the noxious weeds program that we're looking to implement. The commission gets a lot of concerns in regards to trash in the right-of-way, trees in the right-of-way, not mowing our right-of-ways in the county. And we did have the funding back into noxious weeds to hire 2 employees to take care of those areas of work. One of the biggest, I guess, increases or changes, I guess, to the budget would be that the county is working on a proposal and agreement with the city of Hayes to acquire the 911 dispatchers. So that way they would become, as of January 1st, become county employees. Funding for the Rural Opportunity Zone to help attract new employees, hopefully to both Ellis County, but also our Ellis County government, our employees. Creation of a scholarship program, yet to be determined on how that looks, but providing some opportunities to promote local high school students to stay in Ellis County after high school, attend college here locally, and maybe keep them in Ellis County. The good discussion we had with the treasurer in being able to spend a little bit more time on his interest earnings for next year, which will help offset the property tax. I haven't heard if he squeezed out any more money out of him yet, but additional Personnel in the Treasury Department was part of that discussion to be able to grow our amount of dollars that we have and the amount of people that we have in the escrow program to help pay their property taxes. And funding set aside to hire a 5th county attorney. The county attorney let you know that he has some concerns in the future years. Not only are the current county attorneys being recruited with significant pay increases to work in other county attorney offices, but he's also trying to look forward to have that extra funding to hire that 5th attorney to work on their caseload as well as the transition when the next election cycle happens. We did reallocate one personnel in the sheriff's office from a clerk to a road deputy position. And within the fire budget, fire district is to change the way the paid per call firefighters are paid. Instead of being on a contractual basis, they'll be paid through payroll as essentially a part-time employee. The health insurance premiums, it would always be nicer to have those premium renewals before our budget process is done, but it does include the suggested, from our consultant, the suggested increase of 10% in health insurance for next year. Not only does that include our premiums for the health insurance, but also an increase to the funded reserves for that program. And then it did include a slight increase to some of your outside agencies that the commission had discussed at that meeting. So that's a quick overview. What that kind of does in the grand scheme of things that I know I visited with each of you last night on is with everything that we have now, although that seems like quite a bit, the goal of the commission was try to make changes throughout the county to make sure that we weren't raising the mill levy. With where all that's at, it leaves us still under the mill levy, so the mill would be able to be slightly reduced, but also gives a little bit of room for the commission to discuss some of the options that may have been tabled or changed throughout the budget process to get where we were. Part of that point was trying to get the final audit number so we knew exactly where we were and how much final leeway we have to do things. So with that, I'll go over a couple quick items to be able to keep our budget maintained where we're at, look at a couple different options within the future, and still keep our mill levy below the 37.575 where we're at now with the anticipated budget mill at 37. So a couple items to consider would be the outstanding debt that we have for the 2013 GO bond for the western part of this Old 40 when we repaved that about 10 years ago. We could pay that off early. That was originally in the budget, and we reduced that out of there until we knew where we're at this point. That could be added back in and pay that off. As Alexis confirmed, there's no benefit to doing it. It just frees up money in the future years that if the county has less debt, it's less that we have to worry about funding.
But we're still paying the full interest, right?
Correct.
I was trying to capture that whole
It's
piece of
very
that,
little
so,
at this point.
yeah.
After this year, we made I think there's $515,000 payment. And the next 5 years are only $40,000 a year. So one of the last piece of the bond is $200,000, I think, even. And then it was about $45,000. You're testing my memory a little bit, but we'd still pay the interest, but we just wouldn't have that. We have a big savings
Payment
next
out,
year, and
right.
not having that huge $500,000 payment, it drops down. So it
Okay.
just frees us up in some liabilities in future years.
Okay.
So that is one option there. So that would be $160,000 is what we'd have to add to our budget to pay that off at the beginning of the year. One of the items that we had discussed throughout the year was the funding to Fund 78. Currently in 2023, we have $1.6 million set aside to transfer to the Fund 78, which is a Highway, Road and Bridge Fund. Throughout the process and trying to work with the asphalt plan, we reduced that from 1.6 down to 1.4. So a suggested item would be to add $200,000 back to that, to fund that back at 1.6 million to ensure that we're putting the same amount or a good amount of money back to be able to take care of the bridges in the county. Another item that we discussed just a little bit ago, I'm sorry I skipped over it, was putting the money aside for the findings of the wage compensation study. I had mentioned $250,000 there. And then one of the items that the commission had discussed throughout the budget session on July 18th was the PTO buyback program. As I explained to the commissioners about that, the Wage and Benefits Committee had asked about that, if that was still a possibility, and I told them at the last meeting it was tabled because we wanted to find out where we were. That is a number I put down at $150,000. I think that's probably going to be high. That's due to a very high percentage of the employees actually using the program, but that's not fully funding it as if every single employee would do it. But I think after we get the policy out there, look at the IRS guidelines, get it in front of the commission for approval, I think some of the items may, if you limit the, when to be able to do a PTO buyback by having a certain amount of hours in reserve before you can do it, making it irrevocable, which are, it has to be irrevocable for IRS guidelines, I believe, so they couldn't submit it 1 year and then pull it back 6 months later into the following year. And then some just not actually choosing to do it. I think it will be less than that amount. And that money actually wouldn't be, if the commission would choose that option, that money wouldn't be put or dispersed in all the departments. It would be set aside in the budget stabilization account until, one, we have a budget or a policy adopted by the commission, and then we have a application process for all the employees, and then after that point, we would know who would want to do it and how many hours they'd want to do. We could redistribute that into the departmental budgets that's needed. So if only $50,000 was needed, we'd only spend that $50,000. The other would be set aside to not have to budget for in the future years. And then the last item, as the commission is aware, just this last week, we released the bidding documents out for the new public works facility north of town. Those budgets, we have a pre-bid meeting on Tuesday of next week, and the bids are due to here at the admin office on September 5th. So as the commission is aware, we have that project coming up. So the remaining amount of about $500,000 to $540,000 we could set aside for a fund transfer to the capital improvement fund to fund that project. As the commission is very aware, there are several projects that have come in that are over budget. We've tried to do the best from the initial start of that project to where we're at now. We've actually reduced the scope and the cost of it, but there are some options for alternatives or alternates to the project. For instance, maybe doing some of the concrete work that our staff would have to do. I feel that the location will need a fence. That's an alternate. Adding concrete floor to the cold storage. There's several alternates that are in there, but we also got a fiber. We've talked about adding fiber up to that building. We got to drill a water well, and et cetera. So adding that extra cushion in there could be used if we need it, and once the bids come available, and it could help build up that Fund 6 again, the capital improvement fund for future years. So with all that, that would add about 1.3 to where we're at with those numbers that I gave you, 1.3 million, and that would still keep our budget at about 37 mils flat, which would be about 0.6 of a mil reduction from where we're at this current year. And then some of those are one-time costs. The public works facility would be a one-time cost. The debt, paying the debt off would be a one-time cost, and the PTO would be a reduced cost in the future. So that would give the commission some flexibility in future years as we continue to move forward with the process of the acquisition of the employees from the city for dispatch as well. So I probably spoke more than what you wanted me to, but I'll answer any questions if you have any. I glaze you over?
Well, I be honest, a question I had that kind of come up was, I guess I'm going to direct this at Bobby. For elections in the future, do you think that there's going to be a need for maybe an additional polling place or additional postage that we may have accounted for in this year's budget but don't know about?
That, I'm not anticipating any. So, I mean, that's just something that is just hard to even gauge.
Okay,
You just don't know.
okay.
Sorry, it's not a very intelligent answer.
Sorry to blindside you with the question. But, so as of right now, Darren, that is a 0.6 mil reduction, taking us from the 37.6 down to an even 37.
Correct. And as I'm sorry I did forget, because I was probably talking too long. We do have the option of, mentioned with the tax abatement from the ITC transmission line coming through town. That was not initially included in the state assessed utilities, which are determined from the state, not by our county appraiser's office. But they weren't reported to us or on the certification that was given to the clerk. So there is a potential, I will say potential, so don't count on it, that if we did this plan and we reduced it by 0.6 mils, if we got that, there could be a good chance to the county that the amount of additional taxes that we would get from ITC could reduce our mill by another 1 mil. So the way it is now with these additions that we just talked about, it's 0.6. If we get the tax abatement in time and they get everything fixed at the state, it could be about a 1.6 mil reduction. But I don't want the commission to count on that or the public to think that we're guaranteeing that that's the case. That's just a potential option that's out there. I don't feel it's best to budget for it at this point, since the state didn't provide that information to Bobby, our county clerk. If it was on there, it would have been addressed already.
And just for my notes, what is each tenth of a mil worth?
Tenth of a mil is about $54,000.
Okay. Thank you.
It might be actually 50,400, but roughly.
Okay, that helps me.
And that's the estimated valuation where we're at of the current assessed valuation. The final assessed valuation will be reported to Bobby by the November abstract, and that will change.
Okay.
What would be the mill then? We're at 37 with the inclusion of these additional items.
That's included that.
What would it be without? So we've, again, from our commissioner budget meeting with all the department heads, we've got all those in there. We essentially, as you rework the budget, have money left over, for lack of a better term. So you're proposing adding these 5 items back in. Without adding these 5 items back in, where would the mill be then?
The current estimate would be right at, without those 5 items that we just talked about, at 34.5.
Okay. So that's about, what, two and a half mils, do my math quick in my head. Okay. I guess my quick general thoughts is, I mean, we did, I guess, exactly what I kind of always wanted to get done as far as our budget is. I wanted to help lower the mill, even if it's somewhat of a token amount, getting down below 37. Looking at these 5 items to get back in and still stay at that 37 and lower. Again, these are one-off items. To me, it makes sense to get them in our budget this year since we can. And it looks like, again, these are kind of one-off items that would help us in future budgets, very likely. Again, continue to look to see if we can lower that mill even further if we're knocking these off now. We could certainly take that leap and not add these items and get down to 34, 35. But then I worry what next year's budget, how tight would it become then? So I guess from my standpoint, we've done a good job, Darren and the other department heads and everybody, getting us information to allow us to continue to meet our budget, lower the mill somewhat, and meet what we had in mind as far as roads and bridges and weed and RAWs and scholarships. And now we're at a point where we can actually go above and beyond. So in particular, I'm in favor of getting the debt paid off, because again, that just frees up the budget almost immediately next year. Roads and bridge, and then the whatever, 550 to capital improvement, because we really don't know what the public works is going to end up being. So I'd like to be able to capture some of that now to set aside. It's not hesitation on the budget stabilization for wage and benefits and the PTO buyback. That's about $400,000 between the two. I don't know if so it kind of goes back to a little bit of that conversation before. We put 250 in there, we get the study back, we don't necessarily, hopefully we don't need to use 250,000 to get everybody up to whatever. So we can essentially save that or move it elsewhere within the budget.
Correct. So those two items,
And while you're thinking that through, and I'm thinking, the paid time off is kind of a benefit. Is the wage and benefit going to address those kind of things as well?
they are I like to include them. I like to collaborate with the wage and benefit to hear their inputs and thoughts. We talked about what that may look like last week, but we also talked about it several months ago when we had our last wage and benefit committee. And I do have the actual list with me here this time. It was pretty much overwhelming support that was a benefit that the employees would like to see. I think they would like to see it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would actually use it. They would just like to have that option there as part of it. To your question about those two items as to where they would be, they wouldn't actually be, until they were actually used, they wouldn't be included in any departmental budget. We would just keep them in Department 97, which is the contingencies, transfers, and subsidies line items. The budget stabilization account would be the most likely place. We would increase that by there. And then if we used only a certain percentage of it, that would be brought to the commission for a budget adjustment, and we would reallocate that amount to the departments as necessary. If it wasn't used and we got through, say, this point next year, and say, for instance, everybody's paid more than what we need to be paid for county employees. The Public Works building comes in a budget. We have those funds sitting there. One example I gave, I remember to one of the commissioners last night, is we could say, well, that's a good chunk of money to be able to put towards 48th Street. We know how much it would cost to repave that and put it in as a concrete street. We could transfer that fund to Fund 78 and go out to bid to get 48th Street repaved or resurfaced or some work done, or a bridge anywhere. But that's just a good example. I know that's one of the prime roads that the commission hears quite a bit out on. So it would stay sitting there unless it would actually get used, which would not get used until the commission would give approval to do so.
It's not a hesitation toward it, but I just wonder if we are that's 400,000, if we're essentially over allocating what we really need to with that kind of, not hoping to use it for something else, but if we should just allocate less of what we really expect to use for those two things. Instead of over allocating, and then if we don't use it, then we're funded for the future or doing another project. I guess that's a little my hesitation on those two line items. So.
Yeah, and then also the hesitation would be on the other side if we didn't allocate enough, and then we're stuck because then we have a policy in place for PTO, or the money comes back from the wage study and we're further off than what we think we are. Then it's less likely to implement something, and then finding the money would actually be meaning cutting something else to get it done. Mm-hmm. So it's.
And that did happen when, several years back when we, put funding away for bridges and roads. Look what happened on one bridge. It just I mean, it can take it out that quick, so I would rather have a little more in there to do that type of projects if needed, so.
And the good news is, this is only year one. By this time next year, we'll know what the wage study shows, we'll know what the PTO program looks like, and it would not be, it would be budgeted for appropriately next year as needed. And then whatever's not used, whether it's next year or the year's future, could be reallocated or transferred to actually be used for a purpose that the commission would like to see done.
Okay.
As far as we're talking about the study, and I forgot to ask that question, is that going to be in person or is that going to be Zoom when the Arnold Group comes to us? Any idea?
Sure how they present their results.
Okay.
I can find out.
Okay, I guess myself, I would be interested if they come person to person, or if any other commissioners, if one of us or a couple of us or three of us sit in. I mean, I would really be interested in that, joining.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial. I'm sure some meetings that are quick and easy could be done virtually. They are efficient to be that way, but I think there are, I would believe in many pieces when we start looking at specific jobs with specific departments, that they would want to be engaged with the department head face to face. And the other question that Commissioner Liker asked earlier, I wouldn't really push, but I would highly suggest that we're not being compared to Johnson County. I think it would be more comparable to Barton, Finney, Ford, Reno, Saline, counties like that. And I'm sure that they'll take notice of that. If they're having that good of results and got much support from other counties across the state, that they feel that they're having a good study reported to them.
So if I squeeze Vern for another 50,000, we can get to the 36.95 or something?
Well,
That's what we got to work on is Vern.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking, okay, if we add the 1.3 in, that'll get us to 37. If we try and get underneath the 37, we'd have to, essentially, it'd be, if we dropped it down to an even $1 million that we put back in, that would get us down to about the 36.8, 37 mark, or 36.7, 36.8, which is almost a full mill reduction.
And the hard part of that is we could do the best math that we could do right now and get you at
that's just-
36.99, and then once the final valuations come from Bobby, it could put you at 37.01, and all that work would be,
And that's exactly right. And it's
trying just to change something here real quick.
the GO bond, the GO bond, that is approximately a $40,000 a year payment for the next 4 or 5 years.
Next year's 44,250, and then the interest rate slowly decreases every year, but it's 40,000 plus about a couple thousand on top of that for interest each year.
But essentially, it's not going to free up $160,000 worth of spending power on that line item.
It's 45,000.
It's
Very
cumulative.
minimal. And
It's
that's
very
why it was
minimal.
easy to pull out of the budget earlier in the session.
Right.
Because you'd rather to see that 160,000 that we did have allocated to be able to put forward to the road program in noxious weed. That was a direct impact right away to start making some improvements that were needed.
Yep.
So with that 1.3, the estimated mill is 37.045 right now.
Okay.
And there is a thought, like I say, with the ITC, that could go down another
That's not a given.
497,000, which is about 0.9897 mils. But that's not
That's not a given.
not guaranteed.
Anything else, commissioners?
No, that's my thoughts for now.
Okay.
At this, I'm okay at this time.
Yeah, I am too.
Subject to change.
So
Subject to change.
what's the process again? Sorry. We're from this, we just looked at this final budget. Are any changes that we can potentially still make throughout the process yet?
Unless you want to have a special meeting by Wednesday to go over any changes, because I'll have to have I don't know if you looked on the screen, the state budget forms to be able to set all the levy amounts and the tax amounts and everything to get to Bobby, so that way it's listed on next week's agenda for approval for publication. So after today, I'll make, I think I'm hearing that you want to include that 1.3 million in there. If that's the case, I'll make those changes tomorrow and have everything finalized before we publish the agenda for Tuesday. And after that, that's kind of it for the budget process. Next week's just a formality to make a motion to approve to publish, and then we wait until September 12th for the public hearing and the R&R hearing, which is a combined hearing, and then make the motion to approve the budget, and then the rest is on the county clerk for the rest of the year to get everything finalized. And we wait until March, April next year to start again.
Okay.
Thoughts, Neil?
I'm good with it.
Works.
You're good?
I'd really like to see this to come in a little under, to trim a little bit. I like Darren's idea on adding the 1.3 in, but I'd also like to maybe try and trim it down just a touch. To try and do our best as of now with the numbers we have now to get us under. We're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We're splitting
Yes,
hairs.
Absolutely.
My gut comes to, we do it this year, and I think that, my gut says that'll help us put more next year, where we can really, if we need to put a squeeze in or really cut, we can find it a little easier there. So I think we
Okay.
do what we can this year and still stay under the mill or under what we've been at. And it looks like these things will help us free up next year's budget. So I guess that's what
Okay.
is where I'm at.
And at that time, ITC will probably be a little bit, where we'll know a little bit more too for,
Yeah, and once we find out, when Bobby gets her final valuations in November, we can bring back a commission agenda item to show you exactly where we're at when she fills out the levy sheets and everything for everybody. Maybe Bobby can present it that time.
Not my job description.
we're doing a study. Okay, moving forward. County Administrator report, Darren?
Wrong page. Couple items. The Commissioner Younger wanted me to remind you to visit with Bill Jeter about the property out in Shinchin. I don't know if you were able to do that before the meeting.
No, I had not.
So I guess we can have the three of us can meet up after the meeting to talk about that. Remind the commission that on Monday, August 21st, is the joint city-county meeting that we'll have. It's going to be at Grow Hay, starting at 6 p.m. I did meet with city staff this morning. If you want to come about 30 minutes early, we'll provide Jimmy John's for everybody to eat. I visited with Colin this morning with the city. We're going to just have some supper, break some bread before the meeting. And so if you want to get there about 5:30, we'll eat and then have the meeting about 6 and go over the dispatch and road agreements as part of the law enforcement change. And other than that, I just wanted to offer Commissioner Liker my condolences on your brother-in-law the other day. So thoughts and prayers are with your family.
Thank you.
Okay, County Commission reports, Mr. Liker?
I'd just like to thank dispatch and rural fire and EMS for the work they do on situations such as we had, and they're always there when you call, so thank them for that. You hope you never have to use that service, but it's there when you need it. So other than that, I have no other report.
Yeah, that's my sympathies and condolences to you, your family, your wife, extended family and friends. Tough situation, so that's what I'll say about it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, also, I had said it to you before the meeting, but yeah, thoughts and prayers out to your family, and affects a lot of lives. Big family, and everybody keep their head up and move on. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I did last night attend the Ellis meeting. Pretty short, Mr. Commission. Thank you for coming. But yeah, we got out of there relatively pretty quick, and the rain followed us. So, but that's all I have. So, and thanks again for everybody coming and everybody's expertise in working together. And I guess, Bobby, to answer your question, we have no executive sessions. Like to adjourn at 9:35.